In this video, I'll review concepts from Chapter 26 of Human Anatomy and Physiology, 11th edition. This chapter focuses on fluid balance. In particular, we'll be looking at electrolytes, including the importance of sodium, as well as mechanisms for regulating sodium balance. Most extracellular fluid osmotic pressure is exerted by sodium, hence our focus on this particular electrolyte. It's the most abundant cation in the extracellular fluid, and it's going to contribute, those sodium salts that is, are going to contribute to 90% of the solute concentration out there in the extracellular fluid. It's really the only cation exerting significant osmotic pressure. So that means that changes in sodium levels can affect a lot of other features, such as the plasma volume, your blood pressure, your extracellular fluid volume overall, as well as interstitial fluid volume. Therefore, regulation of that sodium is incredibly important. The sodium-water balance is going to be linked to blood pressure and blood volume, and it's very tightly linked to control of those two features. And changes in blood pressure or blood volume are going to trigger neural and hormonal controls that regulate sodium content. So your nervous and endocrine systems are going to try to control blood pressure and blood volume via regulation of sodium. Aldosterone is one of the major hormones, or is the major hormone that's helping to regulate sodium and water reabsorption, and it's going to act in the kidneys. So this is an adrenal hormone, so it's secreted by the adrenal cortex, and it is going to cause decreased urine volume and increased blood volume. So overall, it's going to cause water to get reabsorbed into the blood. Active reabsorption of remaining sodium in those distal convoluted tubules, so remember back to the nephron, so we've got active reabsorption of sodium in those distal convoluted tubules and collecting ducts. That's going to lead water to follow the sodium. So in reality, what's happening is the adrenal cortex is releasing aldosterone. That aldosterone targets those cells within the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct and leads to increased sodium reabsorption. The water is then going to follow that sodium back into the blood, and that's why we say it regulates sodium and water reabsorption. Additionally, you can see over here that it's going to increase the secretion of potassium. So we're going to have another side effect, but for now let's focus here on the sodium in that slide. All right, so low plasma sodium is going to trigger aldosterone, and it's going to do so in three different ways. One is that low sodium in the blood is going to stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. Additionally, it's going to decrease here the renal filtrate sodium chloride. So that's another stimulus. And then finally, there's going to be decreased juxtaglomerular cell, granular cell stretch. So these two, you might want to look back at the kidney function slides from the previous chapter. All right, but with all three of these stimuli, you can see that it all leads to the same results, which is increased renin release from those juxtaglomerular cell, granular cells. Juxtaglomerular complex granular cells. So we have increased renin. Renin is a hormone, again, produced by those granular cells. That's then going to travel to the lungs, stimulate increased angiotensin II release, and the angiotensin II will stimulate aldosterone to be secreted from the adrenal cortex. And then that is going to have the effect that we looked at back here. It's going to act on the collecting duct and distal convoluted tubule to increase sodium reabsorption and cause passive water reabsorption along with it. And so hopefully that's going to restore the concentration of sodium in your plasma. So it starts here with three different mechanisms, but then really converges on the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So set points for plasma, sodium and potassium can be restored by aldosterone. I'll remind you again that while reabsorption of sodium is stimulated by aldosterone, it's actually secretion of potassium that's stimulated by aldosterone. So if your body senses increased plasma potassium, so if there's too much potassium in the plasma, that's going to also stimulate aldosterone release. So then that will then have its effects as shown in this illustration in the kidneys. There's also another hormone called atrial natriuretic peptide, or ANP, and it reduces blood pressure. So ANP is released by cells that are found in the atria, so the atrium of the heart, in response to stretch. So if these atria become stretched too much, that is going to stimulate ANP secretion. ANP is going to decrease blood pressure in two main different ways. One, it decreases release of ADH, decreases renin, and decreases aldosterone. And overall, those are all those actions will lead to decreased blood volume. Additionally, it's going to decrease the release of angiotensin II, and that's going to act to increase vasodilation. So your blood vessels will dilate, lowering your blood pressure, and your blood volume will decrease, also lowering your blood pressure. So two different mechanisms for reducing blood pressure. Some other hormones that are also regulating sodium reabsorption. So far we've looked now at aldosterone, we've looked at ANP, and now if we wanted to increase sodium reabsorption, estrogens do that, as well as glucocorticoids. So increase sodium reabsorption. Estrogens lead to or cause sodium or water retention during the menstrual cycle and during pregnancy. And glucocorticoids actually promote edema, so buildup of fluid in the tissues. So if you wanted to decrease sodium reabsorption, progesterone can also do that. It does that by blocking aldosterone. And so that's going to promote the loss of sodium and therefore water. Because remember, aldosterone is stimulating reabsorption of sodium. So if you block it, now the sodium is lost in the urine, and there's no passive reabsorption of water, so it's also lost in the urine. And I will leave you with a question about aldosterone. Aldosterone increases blood pressure. True or false?